From where I want to bring in Ron MacLean. He is the host of Hockey Night in Canada and a longtime colleague of Bob Cole. Ron, this is a sad day. I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah, appreciate it, Andrew. And first thought I had was what a beautiful family, the Cole family. So Hillary and Christian and Megan and Robbie are all gathered with their kids in St. John's, Newfoundland. Karen, his longtime partner, the mother of those children, his four beloved. Bob was so proud of the kids. They're all talents in their own right. Megan became a great actor. She performed in a play called Jitters at Brock University. Went to see with Bob her perform. He was a pilot, certified pilot, and Robbie is a great pilot. They're just a great family. And I had so many visits to Topsail, Newfoundland, to Bob's home. And as you know, he made such an impression on Hockey Night in Canada and listening to those calls. It starts even back in '69, Andrew. Jean Beliveau, during the '93 Stanley Cup playoffs, the Montreal Canadiens won 10 in a row in overtime. And Jean Beliveau said to Bob, Bob, it's a funny thing. I don't think I ever got an overtime winner. And Bob says, oh, I'm sorry, Jean, to remind you, but you did. You scored in double overtime at the Boston Garden in 1969. And Jean Beliveau says, how do you remember that, Bob? And Bob said, because it was my first ever Hockey Night in Canada radio, but my first ever broadcast nationwide was you scoring in double OT. So wow. Crazy.
That is crazy. So when you hear some of those calls, I mean, people are just posting all these calls online, just, calling him a legend. I mean, you just can't almost find the words, But, well, I'm going to put you on the spot. Find the words, Ron, to describe this man.
Well, he is what became the sound of hockey. We all can sort of picture his, presence on the game with his inflection. He was taught by Foster Hewitt. I'm sure you know the story. He brought an audition tape into CHFI radio in Toronto, said to the receptionist, I'd like to leave this for Mr. Hewitt. And the receptionist says, well, I'll get Foster right now. And out comes the legend, Foster Hewitt, and he brings Bob into an office and he said, Bob, there's 4 levels of projection. You need to understand you can't be at this pitch, fever pitch all the time. He said, you start with the details of the game, setting the scene in a normal conversational voice. And then when there's a very important face-off, well, that's when you begin to heighten your projection. And when there's a big hit, well, then you go to the level 3. And when there's a save or a goal that will turn the game, that's what you reserve for level 4. And he never lost that understanding. And he was a huge, I mentioned Megan playing a role in Jitters, a play at Brock University. Bob, we would always go, like when we were in New York, to Anything Goes was a favorite of his, Cole Porter's production on Broadway. We would go see it, and he studied how an actor or a thespian does their craft. And he was just incredibly talented, and yet never perceived himself as the leading man, always thought of himself as the director of this evening's broadcast. And he would have his hands out to stop everybody from speaking so that we could hear the crowd, and so on. Just an incredible understanding of what made for a good show.
And he just loved the game, right? He said he still got goosebumps going into a broadcasting booth into his 80s.
Well, it's funny. We only did his birthday, I think, one time. June 24th is his birth date. And he was very secretive about all that stuff, his age, his birthdays. And no, it's not about me. But we did know that it was June the 24th because there had been a lockout and the playoffs dragged on into the end of June. So we were in New Jersey for Bob's birthday. Game 4, the Devils would win the cup that night. But that morning at the hotel, Joe DiMaggio, the great baseball player, was in the lobby. And Bob shook hands with Joe DiMaggio, and you could just see again Bob's respect for athletes. He and Wayne Gretzky, Sidney Crosby would always call Bob on opening day of the season. I just spoke to, in fact, Crosby kind of got me onto that wavelength. We talked all the time, but I always made it a point to phone Bob on the opening day of the season and the opening day of the Stanley Cup playoffs, because Sid would do that. And Gretzky, the funny thing about Wayne is whenever he's the most generous human, well, Crosby's like that too, but anyway, he would give Bob a stick for Robbie, Bob's son, Wayne Gretzky would. And I kept saying to Wayne, do you not realize Robbie's up to 25? He could open a shop in St. John's, Newfoundland to sell sticks from you, Wayne. It was so neat to see the respect Wayne had for Robert. And yeah, we all, owe him so much. For me, Andrew, when I started, he gave me a little compliment in my rookie year. I had so much anxiety, and I had worked a Friday night in Chicago, came home for Hockey Night in Canada on the Saturday, and Bob walked into the studio and he said, watched the whole game last night? Don't change a thing. And, it meant the world to me. And even last Saturday, he says, you're doing a great job, Ron. He just always would lift you, always gave you belief. And as you know, belief lifts talent.
And the calls. I mean, some of the most iconic calls in Canadian hockey history, right?
Well, the one you played from the Olympics in Salt Lake City in 2000, who could take, the only guy I know is Russell Crowe. He came and did the NHL awards, and he turned the word art in Art Ross, which goes to the leading scorer. He turned that into multiple syllables. Bob was the same way. G-O instead of Joe Sakic, and he called that day, surely that has to be it. And stand up and cheer, Canada, because it had been 50 years since the nation had won a gold medal. And I remember for me as a youngster, I was like 2 years away from being on Hockey Night in Canada myself. And I'm all wrapped up in the Edmonton Oilers' first Stanley Cup in 1984. And Bob's call was just incredible. There's a new bunch on the block, the Edmonton Oilers by name, and the Oilers have just won the Stanley Cup. And, to us Albertans, it was, it's etched. It's etched. And oh, baby, right? Yeah, that's Mario. Excuse me, Mario Lemieux, 91 when he split the 2D. That's a big one. That you played the Red Army call in 1976, Beliveau 69. That's, Hemingway said, to be great, you have to last. And Bob did it for 50 years. And the funniest thing, he did the 72 Paul Henderson goal as well for radio. And this is where I connect to Bob so greatly, is he was in a fight later that night, just a verbal fun fight, with Red Fisher, a legendary columnist for the Montreal Gazette. Red had one can of Coke Classic, the original Coke. And Bob would like just a splash of that to go with a rum to top off a wonderful trip to Moscow. And Red said, no. You're not having it. And so Bob tried, well, I've got a migraine. I got a splitting headache. I need to swallow an aspirin. Surely you could give me a little Coke for that. No, you're not having it. And that's so Bob, he's competitive. And I remember playing golf with him at Kemper Lakes in Chicago, and Michael Jordan was on the tee box with us half the day. And Jordan would go out and star in the NBA playoffs that night with the Bulls. Anyway, I had about a 200-yard shot to the stick on a par 4 the 16th. And Bob and I were in a match with Dick Irvin and Jim Gregory. And Bob said, Ron, you're not going for it. You're laying up here. You're going to hit your 7-iron. You're not hitting a wood. I said, no, Bob, I'm very good with my 5-wood. I can do this. We can win the hole and be right back in the match. And, of course, I knocked it in the water. And to this day, Andrew, I will not golf in the Stanley Cup. I was so traumatized by letting Bob down that I said, that's it. No golf, no feeling guilty during a broadcast.
That's incredible. I mean, all these memories, these personal memories. It sounds, I don't like to ask the kind of legacy question, but I feel like I got to. I mean, what will Bob Cole's legacy be, do you think, to this game that he loves so much?
That the fans adored him the way they adored the athlete. He had such respect. I mentioned Gretzky and Crosby and Jordan and DiMaggio, and, you could put actors, and, he loved Frank Sinatra, and Vic Damone was a very popular singer to Bob. But he is revered, in that same sort of sense. And for sure, the legacy of the broadcast, Hockey Night in Canada, the story is basically authored by Danny Gallivan, Foster Hewitt, and Bob. So he's one of the, I would say, 3 writers of what has become for all of us just a slice of Canadiana, and something we look forward to. And when he started, Newfoundland wasn't even a part of Canada. So he understood that, I always say, he understood the bridge. Foster Hewitt would say, hello, Canada, and hockey fans in the United States and Newfoundland. And Bob, sitting in St. John's, with, God, he's talking to me. I can't believe this. So he knew that you could connect people. He knew that the broadcast really was a bridge.
Ron, appreciate you making that bridge for us back to him today. Appreciate this very much. Thank you. Ron MacLean is the host of Hockey Night in Canada. He joined us from Oakville, Ontario.